A couple of theme parks in the Appalachian Mountains, plus all of the infrastructure they ended up building, would not have existed if it were not for a surgeon, an insurance agent, and a supply dealer. Hello and welcome to the channel that is 190% Tweetsie, where I'm going to attempt to educate the masses with this wonderful thing called the internet. To start off this possible series of possibly educational videos, I will be talking about the short-lived but crucial Shenandoah Central Railroad and its place in Tweetsie history. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to show off my beautiful custom-made Tweetsie number 12 as it ran on the Shenandoah Central Railroad. This engine was customized by the great Tweetsie historian Johnny Grable, who is one of the many sources of information for the information in this video. Also is John Waite and Chris Ford in their book The Blue Ridge Stemwinder, and the website Cy Crumley's Scrapbook, which is run by Ken Riddle. And I would highly recommend checking out all of the writings by all of these authors and all the websites by all of these authors, because they got plenty of more information besides what I'm getting ready to ramble on about. On September 24th, 1950, the last passenger train ran on the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad. Over the next couple of years, various pieces of equipment were offered to towns along the railroad as display pieces, but were ultimately scrapped, until the only piece of narrow gauge equipment that was left was locomotive number 12, built in 1917 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia, with 45-inch driving wheels. Triple Combine 15 was built in 1917 by the Jackson and Sharp Company and was designed as a railway post office in the front, baggage in the middle, and room in the back for 12 passengers, and all that was crammed into less than 44 feet by 9 feet of space. An Excursion Car 11 was built in 1911 by the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad in their own shops, and it had 2 long benches going down the length of the car facing each side of the tracks, and it was 36 feet long. And in the years leading up until 1952, Dr. Paul Hill, a surgeon in Harrisburg, Virginia, had hoped and dreamed to operate his own museum train on his farm in Penlaird, Virginia, which is between Harrisburg and Elkton, and about 2 hours north of Lynchburg. A friend of his, C. Grattan Price, who was the insurance agent out of this crowd, had worked on a short-line railroad and was a member of the U.S. Army's Railway Division and had been an engineer on General Eisenhower's train in Europe during World War II. Soon the owner of Harrisburg Coal, Oil, and Feed Supply, Wade W. Menifee Jr., was invited to join the cause too. They decided to call it the Shenandoah Central Railroad and make it a narrow gauge railroad, that is to say, smaller than 4 feet 8.5 inches, that is American standard gauge. They sent letters to various railroads and places to buy used railroad equipment, and the only one to respond was the East Tennessee and Western North Carolina Railroad. The 3 of them traveled to Elizabethton in the autumn of 1952, and they loved what they saw. The ET and WNC Railroad was still operating trains on the standard gauge portion of their track, and they had dual gauge track for a short distance. They probably test ran the train back and forth a few times. Everything looked alright. The asking price, though, was too much for the trio from Virginia. The president of the railroad, Alfred Steele, wanted to make sure that the train went to a good home, and wanted to save what was left of the narrow gauge, so he talked the board of directors into cutting the price by 2/3. They bought the train and they painted the engine and cars before loading them onto standard gauge flat cars in December of 1952 and sending them to Virginia, and it took a lot of outside help to get the railroad set up and running. The Chesapeake and Western Railway, which was right across the highway from the railroad's new home, gave rail to the operation. The Norfolk and Western Railway donated cinder to be used as ballast, which strikes me as not being very good for water quality or drainage. But to think that Tweetsie number 12 may have operated on top of the waste products of such greats as 611 or 1218 or maybe even a Y6B. The N&W also donated cross ties and a semaphore, and the president of the Southern Railway, Harry A. DeButz, donated various parts and supplies for the locomotive and cars. And somewhere among the many benefactors of this railroad, someone donated and installed the most important part of a steam locomotive, the class lights, or marker light, depending on which side of the train you're on. Yes, it was here that Tweetsie number 12 would gain its most important feature. As they put everything together, they realized that two 30-foot-long benches could not hold many people, and the combine could only seat 12, so they went looking for another coach. The president of the East Broadtop Railroad, J. William Wetter, sold them for a greatly reduced price the mining Coach 5 that was built in the 1870s. The Shenandoah Central Railroad opened on Memorial Day weekend 1953, with various presidents of various railroads visiting. Passengers boarded at the depot built right across the road from the Chesapeake and Western Railway on U.S. Route 33, and the train ran every 20 minutes. The train ran along and over a creek called Cub Run, about a mile downhill, until they stopped at a picnic ground. It also had a Y in there somewhere. They ran on weekends and holidays during the summer of 1953, and they actually made a profit. They had almost 10,000 riders. In year 2 of the Shenandoah Central Railroad, they only had about 6,000 riders. There really wasn't much to the area, really. Just a short train ride out in the middle of nowhere. Even now, there's only one housing development within a mile of the grounds. Hold a minute. It's still undeveloped. Let's fire it up. Let's take it over and rebuild it. They ran their last public run on Labor Day 1954, and on October 15th, 1954, Hurricane Hazel rained down on the mountains of Virginia, causing the peaceful Cub Run to overflow and wash away the trestle and a good amount of track. They put the equipment up for sale after that, but that's another story. And that was my attempt at an educational video on the history of the Shenandoah Central Tourist Line Railroad. I got a lot of my pictures and information from the Cy Crumley Scrapbook website, which is run by Ken Riddle, which I shall attempt to link in the description of this video. There are also plenty of pictures which I got from the Tweetsie Railroad Railfans Facebook group, which used to be a public Facebook group, which meant that people like me who do not have a Facebook account could spy on it and get all sorts of pictures and information about the history of class lights. And I also referenced, of course, quite a few books from Chris Ford, John Waite, Johnny Griebel, Tweetsie Country even. And I also got a sizable amount of information from a brochure which was included in a video by the YouTube channel Baldwin Loco 12. And he has quite a lot of brochures which you can learn a lot of information from, surprisingly enough. Who would have thought that brochures from 30 years ago would have had information about what railroads were like 30 years ago? But he's got a video about Rebel Railroad and the Dollywood Express and Tweetsie and Shenandoah Central and quite a few other things. So check out all of these things and give them support, because for some reason I'm the most popular YouTube person, train person in the state, it seems like. And I'm attempting to branch out into more educational and less silly means as I shake my camera around the class lights. But if you want more videos like this, just let me know, or I'll just keep on publishing Tweetsie filler from 5 years ago until the heat death of the universe.